welcome back to my channel. Today I'm just going to go through the books that I read in January and the books that I want to read in February that are on my TBR. So if you want to subscribe, that would be lovely. I also have a TikTok and an Instagram, so I'll post the pictures or links or whatever down below, so you can follow those if you want to, and let's just get into it. So the first book I read in January I don't have a physical copy of, but it was Kingdom of the Feared by Kerry Maniscalco, and I read that straight before I read Throne of the Fallen, which is one of my other books. Kingdom of the Wicked, the series, is about the Princes of Sin, and it follows a girl called Amelia, and she is investigating, solving her sister's murder essentially, and she has to team up with one of the Princes of Sin in order to do that. Book 2 and 3 are a little bit of a different storyline. Well, same storyline, but the plot sort of veers off a little bit. These books do get a lot of stick for sort of being completely different to what you first sort of expect from the first book, but I really enjoyed them. I gave Kingdom of the Feared 3.75 stars, but I did really enjoy it. That being said, I think I gave the whole series 4 stars. I would really recommend it, and I definitely think if you're into classic romantasy books, then definitely give it a read. It's quite fast paced, and it's about witches, and it's set in Italy, and it's a really nice setting. So if it sounds like something that you'd normally read, romantasy, about witches, all that good stuff, I'd definitely recommend it. The next book I read was Throne of the Fallen, also by Kerry Maniscalco. This one was a book club read. So I go to a book club in a local plant and cafe shop like in my town, and this was chosen to read as our book of the month for December. But I only read it in January. The book club was on the 7th of January and I read it in the first week of January. So this one is also by Kerry Maniscalco, as I said, but this one is more of like a spin-off, I would say. This one, there is a lot of talk that it's a standalone, but after reading Kingdom of the Wicked, I definitely don't think it's a standalone. I think it's more of a spin-off. I don't know if those two words are interchangeable or not, but I would say this is a spin-off series rather than a standalone. People say you can go into this one without having read Kingdom of the Wicked, but I would not recommend that, because there is a lot in here that is in Kingdom of the Wicked and that series, like the lore of the Princes of Sin, the circles they rule over in hell, all that sort of stuff, and you get to know their characters a little bit. This one follows Prince Envy, which is one of the princes of hell, and the next book after this one follows Prince Gluttony. So I would definitely say read Kingdom of the Wicked, otherwise you might not enjoy this one as much. I rated this one 4 stars. It's again a classic romantasy. It's quite spicy. It's got enemies to lovers, but I wouldn't say it's a slow burn. It's got tension, and I really enjoyed it, so I definitely recommend this one. The next book I read in January was Assassin's Blade. If you follow me over on TikTok, then you might know that I started my Throne of Glass journey. I'm sure I've talked about it on a YouTube video as well, but I started my Throne of Glass journey in January, and I started with Assassin's Blade for no other reason than I'd done some research on it, and I decided I wanted all the context that's in this book before I went into Throne of Glass. I wanted to know what was going on. You can either read this one first or you can read it 3rd or 4th, but like I said, I decided to go with first, and I'm really glad I did. And I'd recommend that order to anyone, but I'm sure people who have read it 3rd and 4th will also recommend that order. So it's up to you really. I'd say do your own research, but just remember, whichever order you read it in is good enough as long as you read it. There is a lot of good stuff in this book, and there's a lot of stuff that I think adds a lot of context to the next 3-4 books. So I rated this one 4 stars. And I've heard people say, people that read it 3rd or 4th, I've heard a lot of them say that they didn't like it as much. So maybe the order that I read it in affected that, but I really enjoyed this book. And I definitely recommend reading it first if you're going to start your Throne of Glass journey. Next book I read in January was Throne of Glass. This one was a little bit slower than Assassin's Blade, but it's to be expected because Assassin's Blade is 5 novellas, so they kind of just kick straight off as soon as you start reading them. This one was quite a lot slower. I didn't think there was much world building in it though. I know it's definitely more fantasy than romantasy because there's not much romance in it as well, but I wouldn't say it's a high fantasy. I didn't feel like there was a lot of world building in it, but maybe I got that from Assassin's Blade. There is a little bit. It describes the places and the settings and things like that, but it's not overly descriptive. It's descriptive enough. So I gave this one 4 stars as well, and I definitely think I enjoyed it because of the context that I had from Assassin's Blade. Like I said, it was a bit slow, but I still really enjoyed it. And I think the fact that I'm quite just excited to be reading this series, like maybe helped that along. But yeah, this was a good one as well. Really enjoyed this one. And the last book that I read in January is Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. So I read this book end of January, and I think I literally finished it on the 30th or something like that. But this book left me, I'm not going to do any spoilers, but it left me wondering what was going on. I literally was just like, what? At the end of it, I didn't know how to react. I didn't know where to go from there. And I really enjoyed it though. And I would say the writing style and the reading style is definitely similar to that of Iron Flame over Fourth Wing. There's a lot of world building, there's a lot of descriptiveness, there's a lot of politics going on in this one. And then the action comes towards the end. So I'd definitely say it's more descriptive in the writing. It's more true to fantasy. Obviously there is romantasy, there is romance in it, obviously, with Xaden and Violet and so on and so forth. But I would definitely say this one is a bit more like Iron Flame. But I really enjoyed Iron Flame. I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed Fourth Wing because I love the political descriptive side of it. But just bear that in mind if you're going to read it. Don't go into it thinking it's going to be action straight from the beginning, because it's not. Obviously it does drop you off where Iron Flame like left off, but then it sort of slows down and picks back up. But I gave this one 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I can't wait for the next one, and I can't believe we're gonna have to wait 2 years. Like, I just cannot believe that. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. So those were the 5 books that I read in January, and I think my lowest rating was actually 4 stars. So the thing with me is, let's just go over it here and now. The thing with me is I will give a book 5 stars if I just get a good feeling from it. 5 stars is definitely a feeling for me, and if it makes me happy, if I really enjoy the book, it pretty much will get 5 stars. 4 stars is when I think there's something missing, but I still loved it, still had a really good time. 3 stars, I think it's when it's just kind of, it's neither here nor there, but you know, had a good time. And then I think 2 stars and below is probably something that I didn't enjoy and wouldn't recommend. But yeah, that's just a little bit on my rating system, if you were wondering going forward. And now let's get into the February TBR. So the first book I wanted to read in February was Holding the Reins. This one's by Paisley Hope, and this one is it's a cowboy romance, essentially. It's just a sweet, fluffy cowboy romance. I knew that after Onyx Storm, I was going to go back into my Throne of Glass journey, as well as read 2 other fantasy books. So I just wanted something light and fluffy, so I didn't go into a slump after Onyx Storm. And I do think I really needed it, because Onyx Storm, there's so many emotions going on at the end, and so many questions, that I didn't want to get stuck in that sort of era, not era, but you know, that sort of setting. I didn't want to get stuck there and reading another fantasy book and I'm just thinking of Onyx Storm. So I thought I'll just go to something completely different, and I read Holding the Reins. I gave this one 3 stars. It only took me 2 days to read, but I gave this one 3 stars, and that's only because I feel a bit hypocritical here, because I really enjoy the Rebel Blue Ranch series, and I know nothing happens in that series. Like, the plot is the romance, the plot is the will they, won't they, how are they going to get together, you know they're going to in the end, but the plot is like how you get there. This is essentially exactly what happens in this book, but I've given most of the Rebel Blue Ranch series, so Done and Dusted, Swift and Saddled, Lost and Lassoed, I've given most of those, I think, 4 to 5 stars, because they're just such a fun time. And this one follows essentially the exact same format, but I gave it 3 stars. And I don't know if I can't put my finger on it, but there was just something missing. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed it. I love a cowboy romance, and this one is spicy. Nash Carter has a dirty mouth, but I don't know what it was, but there was just something missing. And I found myself actually skipping over some of the spicy scenes, because I thought, you did this like 5 minutes ago. And don't get me wrong, I am a lover of spice, but I don't think I was feeling it at the time. Maybe I shouldn't have gone into it straight after a fantasy book that I loved. But I am going to go on to the next one, which is Training the Heart, and hopefully I enjoy that one a bit more. But yeah, I've read this one now, so it was on my TBR for February, but I've already read it, and I gave this one 3 stars. The next book on my TBR is actually an ARC read, and I'm 89 pages in so far. So I started it last night, but I was really tired and I started falling asleep. So nothing against this book, I was just really tired. I really wanted to start it, and I'm 89 pages in, and so far I am absolutely loving it. I know I'm only 100 pages in, but This one I would say is high fantasy. It is classed as a romantasy because I think there's a bit of tension and slow burn in there, but I am absolutely loving the world building in this. It's just so detailed, so good. And I'm not new to high fantasy, but I read mainly romantasy, so it's like romance fantasy, like sort of like ACOTAR type level of world building. There's not like giant massive worlds, but this one is quite big, and I do feel like there's a lot to go over in it. But I am really enjoying it. I will update when I finished it. And yeah, so that's my current read, and that's another one that's on my TBR for February. So it's called The Mortal Queen, and it's by Ashley Metzler. It's out on the 14th of February, and I will give a more detailed review after it has been released. Next book on my TBR, I actually don't have a physical copy of. I'm going to get a physical copy of when I go to my book club this month. But my next one, I'll put a little insert here so you can see the cover of it. But the next one that I want to read after the arc that I've read is Nocticadia by Kerry Lake. Yeah, Nocticadia by Kerry Lake. So that's our book club's pick of the month. That's the one I'm going to read next. That's a dark fantasy romance, and I'm really excited to read that one. I've seen so many good reviews on that one. I also want to read Anathema, so I am excited to dip my toes into Kerry Lake's writing, and I'll review that one once I've finished it. But I've heard so many good things, so here's hoping that I do enjoy it. Next book on my TBR for February is Crown of Midnight by Sarah J Maas, continuing on with my Throne of Glass journey. Because I knew I had a book club read coming up and I had an arc I have to read before the 18th of February, I didn't want to go straight back into Throne of Glass after my sort of palette cleanser, like with Holding the Reins, because I knew that I'd have to stop again to read this arc and to read Nocticadia before my book club next month. So I thought I'll just read Holding the Reins, the arc, The Mortal Queen, and then Nocticadia, and then I'll go back into Throne of Glass, because then I can just fully concentrate on Throne of Glass and there's going to be nothing that can stop me then. So that's the next book that's on my TBR for February. I have actually read about 100 pages of this, but I read it before Onyx Storm, so that was probably like mid-January, maybe early January, and then I took a break to do some uni work, and then I read Onyx Storm. So I'm going to start it again because it's been over a month now and I only got 100 pages in, so I'm just going to go from the beginning and start again so it's fresh in my mind. And the next two books on my TBR for February, I'm just going to do them together, is Heir of Fire and Queen of Shadows. So I'm just continuing on with my Throne of Glass journey. I'm hoping I can get these done in February, so then in March I can do the tandem read and Kingdom of Ash, hopefully, and then I'll be done with the Throne of Glass series then, which I don't know if that's going to be sad or exciting, but yeah. So I've heard this one's absolutely amazing. I've not really heard many things about Heir of Fire. I've heard this one is like absolutely amazing, so I'm enjoying the series already, so hopefully I enjoy this one like even more, and I have a great time with it, but who knows. So those are all the books that I want to read in February. If you've read any of them, let me know your opinions. Don't leave any spoilers, of course, but just let me know your thoughts, or if you think there's a book that I might like based on what I'm reading. If you like similar books, please send me all the recommendations because I would love them. And yeah, as always, if you liked my video, then please subscribe, and don't forget to follow me on my other channels on TikTok and Instagram. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.